All right, starting. Welcome to the Stretch Zero podcast. This is the second podcast. Thanks for joining us. I am Brian Mears, joined by Russell Peddle and Brett Weisband. We're going to talk about a bunch of off-season stuff with Paul George going down in injury in the USA game, the Kevin Love trade that was just announced, or at least rumored by Brian Windhorst, and then kind of all the aftermath of rosters that's going to happen with Philly now being involved and what Minnesota's roster is going to look like. So we're going to jump right in so we can talk as much as we can. But we'll start with Paul George and that pretty awful injury that he had in the USA game going up to block a James Harden layup. And now saying that he's going to be out for, at least this year. And hopefully he's going to be back better than ever. But going to be out this year, and how that affects the Pacers. But I kind of want to just start off kind of talking about Paul George and what exactly he meant to the Pacers and just how good he was. Russell, you wrote a column just a couple of days ago talking about how statistically elite Paul George was, and he's still young. He's 25, I think, and 24, yeah. So he's hitting his prime, and maybe one of the best two-way players outside of LeBron in the league. So Russ, talk about Paul and kind of like what we're going to be missing this year from him.
Like you said, he's a great two-way player. He's up there with probably the next one down after LeBron. I can't think of another one, especially not on the wing. What I wrote about in that article, there was a lot of stuff right away with talking about the fallout in Team USA and the fallout on the Pacers in the East and everything like that. And I really found like we were kind of getting away from the point that it's really sad that we're losing such a good player. And especially one like, you have to consider a couple of years ago, like one thing I talked about was, I don't know if you guys remember, but a couple of years ago when Danny Granger was hurt and Paul George kind of came into the starting lineup, and it was kind of like, okay, like what's going to happen when Granger comes back? Paul George looks like he's going to be pretty good. And then he kind of held onto the spot. He went on to win the Most Improved Player award. And then last year he took yet another leap. Like, it's not very often that we see players make that double leap. Like, he's always been kind of a good defender, and well, kind of a really good defender. But the offense wasn't really a sure thing. And the crazy thing about the last couple of years and all 4 years that he's been in the NBA is that offense has really taken off. And like he's increased his scoring average every season, and that's not just with the minutes. I mean, he's gone up in per 36 and per 100 possessions as well every single year. Assist rate going up, turnover rate going down, becoming a great catch and shoot marksman. Like basically, like his catch and shoot numbers are basically right there with like a Klay Thompson. And like we look at him and we say he's a great defender, but his scoring. And his just in particular his shooting is way better than we even give it credit for, and it's a darn shame because he's really that complete package. He's an effective rebounder. He was he matched Roy Hibbert, 7'2" Roy Hibbert, and him averaged the same rebounds per game last season. So like you consider that the long range shooting, the improved scoring, the intense and amazing defense, the athleticism. Like it's a darn shame. And the last point I'm going to make is. Trust me, when someone tells you, like, here in Canada, we didn't have the game out live, an inter-scrimmage game for a different country. Like, obviously, I understand why it wasn't on live; it was on recorded. So I was actually watching it after hearing what had happened. And when someone when you go through Twitter and every single person, like there are 100 people that say, "Don't watch it." I don't care if you've seen it. I don't care what your curiosity is. I don't care what you're thinking. Like, if you think you've seen worse, don't watch it. You'll be happy you didn't. And I watched it, and it was actually blurred out on like they before they went into it on NBA TV Canada. They actually said, this is coming up. This is going to happen. We're going to blur it out. And I was like, okay, well, I'll definitely watch it then. Whatever. And even with it blurred out, it was too much. And so. That's my main thing to take away from that is when someone tells you not to watch something because it's too gross, we should all start listening to that.
Yeah. Go ahead, Brett.
Yeah, my curiosity got the better of me. I, immediately went to the internet and tried to find a picture of it, and I've seen some pretty horrific injuries, and this was definitely among the worst. And it really is a shame because I mean, obviously the Pacers, fell apart last year, but George is, like Russell said, he's one of the best two-way players in the league. Right on the wing, he's right there after LeBron. But and this year, I mean, I know he's kind of jumped up the last 2 years. He won Most Improved, and then he improved his scoring again this year. But I think it's pretty likely that we would have seen another leap from him this year, just in terms of creating for others. Without Lance Stevenson there, he would have had to have more ball handling responsibility, and now, the Pacers they don't have anybody on the wing to really be a creator, and it's really unfortunate because with the East wide open this year, this was probably their window to make the finals, even without Lance. The Cavs, assuming that their roster holds steady, which obviously we can't assume at this point. They probably were, they probably are a little bit away, and the Bulls, who knows about their health over there. So, this could have been the Pacers' year, and now without George, they're still going to have a pretty good defense, but they just lost their two best wing defenders, and you thought the Bulls were bad scoring the ball last year. I can't imagine the Pacers even being as good as the Bulls were. So it sucks. It sucks for basketball. This was going to be a really fun year in the East, and we just lost, one of the top contenders. So, you just hope George comes back, like you guys said. Hope he comes back better and healthier and stronger, because this really, for basketball, this is just a terrible loss.
I really hope he does. I gotta say, I hate these injuries. I know that seems like an obvious statement and everything like that, but it's. And this is part of the game when you follow sports. Like, your heroes they're gonna fall, they're gonna get hurt. It sucks. Like, I can't think of a better way to put it. But I wasn't even necessarily a big Paul George fan. Obviously, I really appreciate his game, but he wasn't one of my favorite players, and that I thought about instantly when people asked me who my favorite players were, and I wasn't necessarily into the Pacers or what they were doing. Obviously, I appreciated it, but I wasn't finding myself pulling for that team at all. But now all of a sudden I'm like, oh, I want to buy a Paul George jersey or something just to show my support. And we're going through the Rose thing all over again, and it's a shame when we lose these players in their prime for a significant chunk of it. And it's going to be a while for George to get back, and hopefully he can get back to where he was. Because the thing is too is, like, we can look at this season's numbers. They fell off a bit at the end of the season. Like, the early season when he was putting up like 24 points a game, was shooting like 48 from the floor and 41 from three, and he was just like he would have been a candidate for Most Improved again. But, like, I made the case in an article back in December, obviously way too early, but he was just, it's like you could tell he had stepped it up another notch. And just to think what another summer would have done, and especially a summer on Team USA and playing that international ball where a lot of people which facilitates a lot of leaps, for as much as people are against not everyone, but like there are people that are against the players going to play international ball. You can put your finger on tangible seasons when people have come back from that experience of learning to play as a team and fitting a role and not being the man all the time, and you can see them come back and they've developed their games in a lot of interesting ways. And it's a shame that we could have seen possibly another leap from him because of that.
Yeah, I agree. I think it'll be interesting to see what the Pacers are like next year.
Terrible.
I think that
they're going to be awful. It's going to be brutal to watch.
Yeah, I think that's the general consensus is that, losing Paul George and then obviously losing Lance to the Hornets, that they're just going to be awful because they don't have anyone to create or really do anything. And, they still have West and Hibbert inside. And that's my thing, that I am just a little hesitant on just completely writing them off. Like, we all give, so much credit to George and Lance, saying that, they're, a huge part of the defense. But I think that may be writing off Hibbert and West, because they were obviously a huge part of the defense. You can't have, one without the other. And so I think that, we have to realize that, they were, historically number one. They, are allowed, 90 points per 100 possessions, and they lost their two best perimeter defenders, but statistically we know that rim protection is more important than perimeter defense. So I'm not completely ready to say that the fact that they lost two perimeter defenders means that they're going to drop from a historically great #1 defense in the NBA to all of a sudden are they really going to lose like 15 points per 100 possessions and drop to the middle of the pack? Like, that's really hard for me to believe. Like, yeah, Lance and Paul George were great, but like maybe they were great because Hibbert was inside. Like, we give so much credit to them and say that like they created so much, but I think that's kind of selling the other guys short, saying that like they also didn't help in the development of Lance and Paul George to be the all-stars that they were. Russ, what do you think?
That's a fair point. I mean, I completely agree with you. I think we're not giving David West especially doesn't get enough credit. I think he's a phenomenal player still, and especially like a few years after an ACL tear, and they actually, funny enough, like you're talking about the distributing of Lance and of Paul George, but a lot of the Pacers offense does actually run through David West, like at the elbow and a little bit in the post, and obviously I think they're going to go to that quite a bit, but on the defensive end was the point you were making. Yeah, I mean, Roy Hibbert was a fabulous rim protector, and he's basically going to get more shots. He's going to face more shots now. I mean, you think Roy Hibbert next year, guys? Do you think he could end up being like a player that could end up averaging 4 blocks a game just because there's going to be so much that leaks into the paint and that he's going to have to take care of?
He's going to have to if they're not going to. I mean, they didn't sign any perimeter stoppers this year to back up Paul George. I mean, C.J. Miles is adequate. Rodney Stuckey is not, and George Hill is what he is. He's solid. So they're gonna have some perimeter issues. And luckily, I mean, even their backup bigs, Jan Mahinmi and Luis Scola are. Scola doesn't have a great reputation, but those two together, I wrote about it today, were phenomenal last season. So they're going to be fine protecting the rim. Their defense, I mean, I don't know if they'll still be in that top 5, but I would have a hard time imagining them dropping out of the top 10. But they're just not going to be able to score the ball. And in the playoffs last year, without George, they scored 96 points per 100 possessions. Like, that's just not going to get it done. You can't beat anybody if you can't put the ball in the hoop, and they're just not going to be able to. And during the regular season, obviously, the teams aren't bringing it, and they're not keying on. They're not able to key on matchups and scout everything like they do in the playoffs, but it's going to be a real slog for them to score. They're $2 million right now under the luxury tax, and this team is they operate as a small market team. There's even if they do get some disabled player exemption for George, there's just no way that they can improve to be even close to a league average offense. Not that they were, all that great last year. There's no way that they can get to that level with, what little money they have to spend. It's just, I mean, I just don't know what they can really do other than, if they can either fight for that bottom of the playoffs or they can go the other way. I talked about it with Russ or maybe Brian on Twitter the other day. Do they bottom out? Do they just go for, unload Hibbert, and I mean he's got a player option after this year, so he could very well opt out and leave. Would it be better to unload him, bottom out, and get a top pick, and have someone young to pair with George and kind of try to reshape this team? I mean, Brian, what do you think about that?
Yeah. I mean, I don't necessarily think that's a bad idea. I don't see. This is kind of like going to be my argument on why Cleveland should absolutely trade for Kevin Love, and we'll argue about that in just a little bit. But the point is just like windows of opportunity to win the title or even just make it to the finals. It's like you just never know. Like they make it to the finals or to the Eastern Conference Finals 2 years in a row, and they maybe just they were up or they were. I don't know. I can't even remember. I think they had tied Miami 1-1, and then was that right this year?
They went up 1-0 actually.
They went up 1-0. Yeah. So I mean, you just never know. Like the East is so wide open. I mean, there is no real elite team, and so maybe you're thinking that if Paul George takes another step up, if the windows are just so small that I just don't know. Like, I mean, if you trade Hibbert, and you try to like retool, like what's the point of retooling when you've got like, I mean, that's just kind of like assuming that Paul George is not going to be the player that he is. Because then if so, and he comes back next year, then what do you do with, Paul George and just a lot of young players that aren't really any good? I mean, maybe you just kind of like throw away the season and just say like, hey guys, like just do your best and wait till Paul comes back, and then we'll reunite this like all historic, all-time great defense, and maybe make a run at it in 2 years. And maybe that year, helps give Hibbert the confidence back that he needs. I mean, I looked at NBAWowie.com, which kind of it lets you take certain players on and off the court so you can kind of see the effects. And obviously, so I did it with both Paul George and Lance Stevenson off the court, and I did it another time with Roy Hibbert off the court, just to kind of see what the difference is. Like, how much of the production, like how good were the Pacers with Roy Hibbert on and off the court as compared to Paul George and Lance Stevenson? And really, it was the exact same amount. Like, I kind of expected, well, they were a little bit worse when Hibbert was off defensively. But in terms of offense, they were actually worse when Hibbert was off the floor, at about the same amount that they were when Paul George and Lance Stevenson was off. I'm not saying that Hibbert's the creator. I'm just saying that like a lot of stuff that they do can be changed, and they can go to the post, and maybe that gives Hibbert his confidence. I mean, a lot of the post stuff that we say that we don't like from Hibbert was because, I mean, why would you do that when you have Paul George on your team? You know what I'm saying? Like, I just think that we're writing them off a little bit too soon. And I mean, if they could tank and guarantee like they're going to get like a top 5 pick, and that person's going to turn into a superstar, then fine. But I mean, just last season we were talking about Hibbert being one of the most valuable players in the NBA. Like, he's the only guy that could stop LeBron James, and these GMs in these interviews said that they would value Hibbert at like $30 million a year just because of what he brings to rim protection and how he affects games in the playoffs. Like, that was 1 year ago. Like, I don't.
Sorry to interrupt you. I think the recency bias on Hibbert is like between Roy Hibbert and Dwayne Wade, I think, are the two most egregious ones, where everyone is just completely like made up their mind on what they think it is now based on like what happened like a few weeks ago, as opposed to like and completely forgetting what we thought like a few weeks before. Like it's and you make an excellent point about Roy Hibbert and that, and I think that's right. And I mean, the biggest fear about doing the tanking thing, like everyone, it's like anything, right? Like people say, okay, we're gonna try and get together this chemistry thing, because that's why the Spurs win, because they've got good chemistry and they bring back the same guys. So the Raptors bring back all the same guys. Or the Thunder are a team that drafted well and amassed picks and stuff like that. So okay, we're gonna do that because it obviously worked well for the Thunder. And so people are looking at this George thing and saying, okay, well, why don't we tank this season? Why don't the Pacers tank this season, get a top tier pick, and then pair him with George, because they're looking at that and they're thinking Duncan and Robinson, right? Like back when Duncan was drafted, because they got the first pick. I mean, they won the lottery and all, but they got the first pick because the season before David Robinson was out the whole season, and so they got to have like this top tier, like one of the best players in the league, paired with the incoming first pick, which of course we haven't seen since, until LeBron and Wiggins.
Right.
So basically, people are chasing that, or people who, I say people, I mean people I read on Twitter that say like they should do this, like that's what they're chasing, and it's a tough game to play, because what if I haven't seen anyone say this yet, and I'm almost afraid to bring it up when I thought about it, but like what if we talked about like Paul George becoming a better version of Danny Granger, like what if he ends up just being Danny Granger, like he comes back from this injury and we want him to be who he was, the All-Star he was before, and he's just not anymore. And it's a weird mirror image thing going on there with his rise on the team being a lower pick, like being looked over by people. The rise as a two-way player, and then to get hurt, and then I just hope he can come back. But anyway, I'm getting away from the point here. Is that the Pacers? You bring up a good point, Brian. Like maybe they won't be as terrible next year as it's hard not to look at them and say like, listen, they're missing arguably their best two players from last season, like their two biggest, their two best players in Paul George and and Lance Stevenson, so it's hard to believe that they'd be okay. But like the East is weak enough, A, and B, you make an excellent point about their defense. Like their defense is still going to be good. Like you can't go from historically amazing to terrible overnight by changing out two players, even if they are a big part of it. You know, like you still have the biggest part of it. So that's an excellent point, and we'll see who steps up and. Who does step up? Who are the starting 2 and 3 for the Pacers next season? Brett, what do you think?
Free Chris Copeland. Maybe
Yeah.
use their offense up a little bit. But honestly, I mean, you look at that roster. I mean, you got to assume C.J. Miles probably gets a starting spot,
Which I don't hate. I don't hate that.
And maybe you put Rodney Stuckey in somewhat of a less toxic environment, and he can get back what he had. I mean, he was like a 16, 17 point a game scorer. He's a little older now. He's pushing 30, I think. Or I guess he's 28. But just a couple years ago, he was averaging 15 a game. So it's not unreasonable to think he could get that back playing on a little bit of a better team with fewer spacing issues or fewer positional overlap issues. Hopefully, I mean, honestly, I think everybody was calling for more Chris Copeland last year. I know he can't defend anybody, but he's probably the most talented shooter they had on that team, and he couldn't get off the bench last year. So even playing against the Heat, when the Heat would throw James Jones out there, who also can't guard anybody, like those two could have just basically sat in the corner bombing threes away against each other, and just seen what would happen. And Copeland still couldn't get on the floor, so who knows if he's got something, if Frank Vogel doesn't like him, but you got to imagine he's going to at least see some more action this year. But going back to Hibbert, I don't think anybody's ever questioned his defensive value. I mean, he's still even whatever he had happen to him last year, he was still one of, if not the most important defensive pieces in the league. Probably because of what happened, and unfairly so, because of what happened with Hibbert's offensive game and his rebounding. He lost the Defensive Player of the Year to Joakim Noah. Obviously Noah was very, very deserving, but Hibbert, after that historic first half, was written off when he fell back to earth a little bit in some other facets of his game, or cratered out, maybe I should say. But he still is one of the 2 or 3 most vital defensive pieces in the league. So obviously, having him, the Pacers will be competitive, but it's just a question of whether or not they can actually beat anybody by just, shutting down the paint and hoping that they can find points somewhere.
So where are they in the East now? Like, where do you see them landing?
I can't imagine them getting much higher than like the 6th seed or so, just because there's going to be nights where they are going to score 70, 75 points, and they just aren't going to be able to, hold their opponent that low. It's just, it's going to be really difficult to watch them just because they're just going to be so brutal on offense.
Yeah, I said in our first podcast that I didn't know where to put them because I see that first tier being the Cavs and Bulls, the second tier being the Raptors, Wizards, and Heat, and the third tier being the Hawks and the Hornets. But now the Pacers obviously very clearly belong in that tier, if at all. So I can see them, like you said, 6th is probably their ceiling, and they might be fighting for a playoff spot. Like, let's see what happens. Let's see if what the Knicks are doing, if they can successfully run this triangle thing through Fisher, through Phil Jackson, and where that goes. And I really don't feel like it's hard to look at the Knicks and say, like, especially without Tyson Chandler, that they're going to be a playoff team again. But going into last season, we did have them, like we were talking about them as a 2nd or 3rd seed in the East, simply because it would have carried over from the season before, and they could be fighting for it. The East is weak enough that they can be fighting for a spot. The Nets aren't completely out of it just because they lost Paul Pierce, and their players are a bit older, and we'll see what happens. And the Pistons, maybe if they make another move, or just because Stan Van Gundy has the widest touch, but we'll see what happens. But I wouldn't be surprised if the Pacers are on the outside looking in, and I wouldn't be surprised if they got that 7th or 8th or maybe 6th seed. I'd be super surprised if they're still up in 2nd or 3rd or 4th. Like some people are saying that, and that seems impossible to me.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that's the case. I think their best case scenario might just be the Hawks this year. They lost Horford, but just kind of do your best, maybe make a run at the playoffs. If you don't, just kind of like just develop your players, and what happens, and wait till your superstar comes back, and then see what you have. I think panic trading Hibbert at his lowest value, or panic trading anyone just to like be different, I don't think it's necessarily a good idea. Speaking of trades, we'll kind of segue into talking about Kevin Love and the reports that now they have agreed in principle, kind of a handshake type of deal, where Love is coming to Cleveland, and they're sending, Wiggins and a pick out.
Do we know anything about the picks? I haven't heard anything on picks. I just know the players.
I saw somewhere it was like a 2018 pick, but I'm not exactly sure. I think it's going to Minnesota, but then I also saw that Bennett was going to Philly, and then Thad Young was going to Minnesota. But I would assume that Philly would probably need a pick as well, because I don't think that they would give up Thad. I mean, if they didn't give up Thad Young this year, I doubt that they would give him up just in a straight one-for-one trade.
Well,
Anthony Bennett.
Yeah, Anthony Bennett. I guess that's all I've heard at this point, or all I've read. Not like I have sources or anything. Basically it would be Love to Cleveland, Wiggins and Thad Young to Minnie, and Bennett to Philly. So I'm sure there are like the picks, and I'm sure there might be another moving piece in there. It seems like I haven't looked at the salaries, but that doesn't seem like it works to me. I don't know why.
So Brett, we have talked on off the air just about like our thoughts about the trade and the timing of the trade. So I think that you like the trade, but maybe you kind of question the timing of it?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, like I think your main argument that when we've been going back and forth on this is if you can get Kevin Love, you go get Kevin Love. Historically the return on a number one pick is not as good as what Kevin Love is already, and he's only 25. It's not like he's going to be falling off anytime soon. He's probably not even reached his peak. But Minnesota is between a rock and a hard place here. Kevin Love is leaving no matter what, so they have to trade him, and Cleveland has the best offer. Like, I mean, Golden State. Pay and go. Sorry, guys. I think that was me.
I can edit all this out. No worries.
Cleveland definitely has the best offer. I mean, you're not going to be able to trump, the last two number one overall picks. But why? I just don't understand. Cleveland can wait until Minnesota's more desperate. Maybe the price drops a little bit. Because I think Flip Saunders probably needs to realize that trading for, a couple of borderline all-stars or even guys below that like they would get from Golden State or Chicago is not going to get that franchise anywhere near a championship. So, why not just roll out this Cavs team and see what you have? And, maybe they set the world on fire. Maybe they come out and they look like the Pacers to start last year. They're just like a juggernaut rolling through everybody. I mean, it just doesn't make sense to make a trade now when you don't even know what this roster that's young and athletic looks like. And I don't want to act like trading Wiggins for Love is a bad idea because, like I said, you can get Kevin Love, but it is worth thinking that maybe you want to keep Wiggins on the roster if at all possible, just because a player like him can help extend LeBron's career. He's going on 30. He's got a ton of minutes and games on his odometer here already. Having someone like Wiggins to guard the best perimeter player every night and let LeBron take some reps off there and save his legs a little bit. Maybe that's more just as vital as having another all-star around him. What do you think about that, guys? Russ, I guess.
I've been against the trade from the beginning, and it's weird to say you're against the trade because they're obviously making a good move by going and getting Kevin Love. Like you're getting two players who are in the I hear different numbers thrown around, but some people argue that he could, Love is a top 5 player, a top 10 player, and then people go, yeah, but defense, and he's not a great defender. His rim protection the numbers there aren't very good. In fact, they're quite bad. But like in terms of like defense, like the Timberwolves last year being kind of an average defensive team and not really getting, I think even getting like being better with Love on the floor than with him off, and like take that for what it's worth. But obviously getting Kevin Love is a big deal because you're getting one of the top 10, at least one of the top 10 players in the league to pair with, the best player in the league. So it makes sense. I hate it simply because I hate watching Wiggins, this talent that everyone has been so high on for years now, for like since the kid was in like middle school. It feels like we've been talking about this next coming of LeBron, who's the next coming of Michael, and so I think the fact that we're beating him down now so hard because he's not Kevin Love, I'm sad because we're not going to get the opportunity to see him develop under LeBron, because you don't. How often do you get a chance to, like, a number one pick can come into the league, especially one that's as highly touted as Wiggins, and to be a third option and to be able to grow without having all the pressure and all the responsibility thrown on him? Like, you throw him over in Minnesota, like, he doesn't have a really refined game. Are we going to watch like a Michael Carter-Williams season again, where we're going to watch this guy just turn the ball over a lot and miss a lot of shots because basically, like, there's no one else to give the ball to, and he's going to have to. He might develop bad habits. He's going to get slammed because he's under such a big microscope now. Whereas, like, as a running mate to Kyrie and LeBron, it would have been really good for his career. So I think we're derailing his career a little bit, and to me that bugs me more than watching like the chance to see Love and LeBron and Kyrie go for a championship, because I don't even believe that they're a championship team with the three of them. Like, necessarily, it's not a shoo-in, is what I'm saying. Like, how much better is, like, here's an honest question for you guys. How much better is this Cavs roster than last year's Heat roster? Haven't they recreated the Heat, three big names with no one really beyond that, and not even like a Ray Allen, at least not yet, to be your fourth wheel, and no rim protector like Chris Birdman Anderson, and really like two stars in Kyrie and Love, who are really known for being bad defenders. I mean, I know Wade's knees are nowhere close to what they were, and but he's got a defensive IQ, and Bosch has become a great rim protector in the last few years, and has really stepped up and embraced that role, and maybe Love does that, and maybe Kyrie does that, and everyone becomes more efficient and la-di-da-di-da. But right now, as it stands, I look at that roster and I say, well, like, I didn't believe that the Heat would be able to compete this year with their roster as it was last year versus like the Thunder, the Spurs, and like they were really exposed in the finals. And now this Cavs team is one that might be worse and might even have a worse supporting cast, and you have like a roster with like zero playoff experience. Like, who has playoff experience on the Cavs now, other than LeBron and, say, Mike Miller and James Jones?
But I mean, Andrew Wiggins doesn't have playoff experience.
Yeah, I know that. Like, sure, but I mean, my point is that using Love to say, like, okay, now we can contend. We couldn't with Wiggins, but now we can contend and we can be an elite force. I don't buy it. I could eat crow later on, but right now I don't see the team as it's constructed and with the pieces it has. After just watching the Heat get absolutely obliterated in the finals, I don't see why the Cavs are going to have a better chance.
So I think that they definitely are a title contender with Love. I wrote earlier.
Okay, sorry, they're a contender. I don't misconstrue the fact that I just don't think that they're a definite contender, and for that reason, that's why I would be hesitant to trade someone who, like Brett said, is going to prolong LeBron's career, and someone who could grow, would have in my opinion, would have a much better chance to grow into a real, like, into something special in Cleveland more than he will, like, rattling jumpers in Minnesota. So it's like risk or reward and all this stuff like that. I don't believe in doing it. I think they're still going to contend. They're still going to be the best or the second best team in the East, and they could very well end up in the finals, and they could very well win a championship. But I don't think the percentage chance is high enough for me now that I would want to trade away like someone with as much potential as Wiggins.
Russ, I think what you said about Wiggins in Minnesota is the thing that bothers me most about this trade. Right now they have a player in Wiggins who can play defense. He can lock down two guards and threes probably. We don't know for sure, but definitely has the skill set, and he can get out in transition and feed off of LeBron, and Kyrie distributing the ball, and he'll get open jumpers because he's playing with LeBron and Kyrie. And if you send him to Minnesota, he's going to be counted on to do a lot of things that he probably is not ready for it yet. I mean, we saw at Kansas last year. I mean, I don't watch a ton of college basketball. From what I saw, he can definitely light it up sometimes, but he's not equipped to carry an offense yet. And he would be assuming, that's where that they don't do too much else with the roster there. He would probably be, a guy that they count on for offensive production. And it's just disappointing because he would not develop the way that he would under LeBron, where he could learn how to, be a dominant defender and how to, start off just filling the lanes on the fast break and eventually grow into more of an offensive role. From a basketball fan standpoint, where you want to see great players or great talents develop into great players, I think the chances of that decrease greatly, with him getting sent to Minnesota, unfortunately. They definitely don't have the best track record for developing players. I mean, Kevin Love, he sat on the bench for his first 2 years there. He could barely get on the court. So they definitely, as a franchise, they don't have the greatest track record, and it's kind of disappointing to see, a young talent like Wiggins and even Bennett, who still, he's definitely not a lost cause, just to see them sent there, and just kind of, who knows if they'll ever develop into what they could be.
Yeah, I mean, I think from like a fan perspective of I want to see Andrew Wiggins develop. You're definitely right that it would be unfortunate. Like the best situation for him would obviously be to stay in Cleveland. I can't argue that. But as far as like if we're looking at it from Cleveland's perspective, for me it's a no-brainer. I mean, if we look at Kevin Love and his stats last year, I mean, if we look at like an advanced stat like win share, I mean, everyone says that he has bad defense, but like win shares is like an accumulation of offense and defense. So, and he was the third best in the league. So it's not like it's not just an offensive stat. You know what I'm saying? He had to be like semi decent in both areas, or else he wouldn't have like totaled a win share that was third best in the league. And his 14.3 win shares is actually, higher than pretty much like every number one pick has ever had in their career. Like Patrick Ewing never had a season that high. Allen Iverson never had a season that high. Chris Webber, Dwight Howard's best season in Orlando when he was up for MVP, he was exactly the same as Kevin Love. So like that's what I'm saying is that like with Paul George's injury and the fact that like you just don't know and like how small windows are for winning a title, like I feel like you just have to go for it. Like if there's any situation that you can get Kevin Love, like statistically a top 5 player in the NBA, say what you want about his defense, the statistics say he's a top 5 player, like you have to make that trade. So like I get that you don't want to wait, but like who knows what happens? Like maybe you wait till the trade deadline and Wiggins has a catastrophic injury, and then all of a sudden, he loses his trade value, and they, the Timberwolves would say, okay, well we'll accept the trade with the Bulls, and all of a sudden you've got a dynasty with the Bulls, and there goes Cleveland's title window. Like you're right, you never know, and that's why I'm making the trade, just because you really do never know. So if you have a chance of getting 2 top 5 guys on the same team and making a run at a title, I feel like you have to take it.
I'm kind of against you on this, but I am going to add a point that really helps your argument here. You were talking about Love being like having like the third most win shares in the league. Interestingly enough, I just brought it up. Kevin Love, the Timberwolves last season were 12th in the league in defensive efficiency, 12th, which surprised me. I didn't see that coming. And Love led the team in defensive win shares with 3.7. So I mean that comes from being on the floor a lot and putting in a lot of minutes, and rebounds probably factor into that as well. And stuff like that.
And that's an important part of defense as well. Like
getting the ball back, yeah.
What is defense? Yeah, defense is ending possessions. It's not like right. If we want to think of just like big men as rim protectors and kind of this like archetype of a big man like Anthony Davis or Andre Drummond, is that's what we want from a big man, then you're right. Like Kevin Love's not that type of player. but defense, the goal is to end the opponent's possession without scoring the ball. And part of that is being able to grab the rebound on defense. And Kevin Love is like the best in the NBA at that. So like, sure, he's not a great rim protector, but what he brings on the offensive side, and also what he can do with rebounding, I feel like I just feel like everyone in the media is like just trying to pick holes at Kevin Love's. Andrew Wiggins may be an amazing player. All I'm saying is that he would have to be a Hall of Famer to be worth not trading Kevin Love for him, because Kevin Love is on a career trajectory to be a Hall of Famer.
But that's my problem with this is I think we're looking at it in like it comes up to sound like we're talking about right now and like the possibility of what he could be, but I think I'm more looking at 2 years of Kevin Love versus the potential of 7, 8, 9, 12 years of Andrew Wiggins. Like, let's say in 2 years' time, this whole thing doesn't work out, okay? And we get they don't get their championships in those 2 years. And then like LeBron's letter, he signed on. He said, "I'm looking forward to developing these players," and basically instead now he's in Miami 2.0. But instead of building that up, they're kind of swinging for the fences with Love. If they don't win championships in the next 2 years, and then let's say it all blows up again, because 4 years ago, I don't know if we really would have thought that this first opt-out year would have been the time Miami would blow up. So let's say in 2 years' time, like I don't think LeBron can ever leave again with the way his letter was worded. Like he's got to be there till the end of his career. I don't know how he ever survives another move, but that's not Love. Love's not tied to that city. He's not from Akron, or Akron or whatever the hell it's called.
Akron.
Akron. Sorry, I'm not American again. I don't.
That's all right.
I don't know how to pronounce your crazy names. But he's not tied to there. So like, who's to say he sticks around? And then 2 years from now, like Cleveland's left kind of with like, pardon me if we have any families listening, but like basically with their dicks in their hands and don't have anything that they can do about it because Love is gone. Like maybe they could try to lure other free agents because, oh yeah, we have LeBron, but we have now a 31 or 32-year-old LeBron and another LeBron that hasn't won a couple championships. And instead, we could have had this potentially like, okay, maybe he won't pan out to be you're talking about first overall picks and statistically how they pan out. Like maybe he won't pan out to be that, but maybe he can pan out to be a really good player that has I know the difference. I know Kevin Love is still young, but he's only under contract for 2 years. He's going to be due a huge contract, and it's the package as a whole. 2 years of Kevin Love versus the possibility of 7 years of what Wiggins could be. To me, that's a no-brainer. I don't see how you give up that potential for that long, especially when you're Cleveland, who has a history of screwing up potential.
Well, because the potential that you're hoping for, like Andrew Wiggins' ceiling is Kevin Love's current where he's at. Like, why would you take a chance on?
Because I could get 4 or 5 years of that ceiling. Like, listen, keep in mind, Kevin Love only a few years ago was traded for O.J. Mayo at the draft. O.J. Mayo, he's not like we couldn't have predicted that he would be this good. So that's why I find it weird that we can dismiss how good someone else can be. Like he's a hyped up guy. Like, and I remember like there was a time when LeBron came into the league and everyone was like, oh yeah, the next Jordan. And they're like, oh, will he really be that good? And we scrutinized him. It's like, oh, he doesn't win. He's not clutch. Gee whiz, isn't Carmelo Anthony dragging his team to the playoffs more? Maybe he's better than LeBron. And now that seems ridiculous. And we're having those same discussions again now about Wiggins, where we're saying, oh, maybe he won't pan out. Maybe he won't pan out. But like, there's a reason that there's got to be a reason deep down why this kid is the one that we've been talking about. We're talking like coming up through, and he's more hyped than Kyrie was. He was like, I would even argue that he's more hyped coming up through than Anthony Davis was, and like there could be something to that, and I think you can much more easily live to regret it for getting rid of him than swinging for the fences and it not panning out. Like it not panning out, it's like, okay, you held on to your first round pick. It was the most highly touted prospect in a decade, and you tried it and he didn't pan out, but that's not your fault. But you can trade him away now, and he can become a transcendent superstar, and then it is exactly your fault. And so
but even if he becomes a transcendent superstar, like history just shows that that's not going to happen immediately. Like guys, very, very, very rarely other than like MJ, Durant, and I mean even Durant took a couple of years, and LeBron. Like, unless you're like a top 10 guy ever, it's going to take you a couple of years. So I mean, let's say, like, I'm not even saying Andrew Wiggins is not going to be a superstar. Maybe he will, but it's going to take him a couple of years. And what if LeBron's out of his prime?
So the letter's already bullshit then. The letter is already like, we praise LeBron for writing that letter and for putting it out. And the whole thing is about developing the young talent and helping Dion Waiters realize his potential and helping Tristan Thompson realize his potential. And instead, now a few weeks later, it's, no, I'm going to put another version of Miami together with younger guys. And not like LeBron's putting it together, but he is pulling the strings a little bit. And like, obviously player development and the chance of them being that is no longer important. It is this 2-year window of championships, which he could have done in Miami. So why did he go back?
But I mean, those guys that he said he wanted to develop are not involved in the trade. You know?
Yeah, I get that. but why are you so invested in making Dion Waiters better than he is and not Andrew Wiggins, who obviously has far more potential?
It's not really Andrew Wiggins versus Dion Waiters. It's not even really Andrew Wiggins.
No,
versus
I don't mean it like that, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, my entire thing is just that Kevin Love is statistically a top 5 guy, and like you just my entire point is that you never know with championships. Like, the entire goal of being in the NBA is winning a championship, and you just never know. And I feel like Kevin Love gives me a better shot in the next couple years to win a title than, like, just the odds are better to win a championship in the next 2 years than they are that Andrew Wiggins pans out.
That's definitely true. But you gotta, I mean, and Cleveland kind of has to operate like that with LeBron. But you've got to remember that LeBron, and he even said this after he penned the letter. He said that he tried to recruit guys to Cleveland before, and it didn't work. And he was already the best player in the world. He hadn't won a championship yet, but he was already the best player in the world, and he still couldn't recruit anybody to come play there. So, I mean, if you're Cleveland, there's no guarantee that Love stays. There's been no indication that I've seen that he would even opt into the second year of his contract like Chris Paul did when he went to the Clippers. So you've got no indication that he could stay. Whereas with Andrew Wiggins, you have him for 7 years. It's damn near impossible for a good first round pick to walk away from the potential security that he has with his original team. I mean, Kyrie just signed a 5-year extension with Cleveland, even though that was before LeBron was there. This is the Cleveland Cavs, who are, without other than LeBron, they're pretty historically awful, and they've shown, their management showed absolutely no signs of turning that around. And Kyrie still re-upped with them because they could offer him a contract that nobody else could. So you've got to kind of look at it both ways. Obviously, LeBron's probably not leaving. After reading that letter, like you would imagine that he would be raked through the coals even worse than he was when he left the first time. But they also do have to operate, as if he's on a 2-year contract and he can leave after 2 years. So I see both sides, but you still, if you blow all of your assets on a trade in the first year of LeBron, and then Love doesn't stay, Love won't opt in, and he leaves, like what? Then you're really screwed. Then you've got a worse team. You've got a worse team than Miami last year. You've got a worse team than that 2007 Cavs team. Like it's. I mean, there's going to be negatives either way. And there really are no guarantees in this trade whatsoever. Whether it's Love staying, Wiggins developing, any of that. It's just, you got to kind of hope for the best. It looks like they're going to make this move, but they're taking on a lot of risk if they trade all of their assets now for Kevin Love.
I mean, I agree. You're right, and it is kind of like what you value, because you're saying, like, what if Kevin Love leaves after a year? I mean, he's probably going to opt out regardless. But what if he doesn't re-sign?
Didn't he swear at some point that, like, he was not signing a second year regardless of where he went? Like he wasn't opting into his player option.
Yeah, but he has no reason to opt in, because I mean could get so much more money if the Cavs just sign him outright. But I mean, they could offer him more money regardless of whether he opts in.
That's just going to lower flexibility. And right now, your depth, your fourth and fifth best player beyond your big three are like Tristan Thompson and Dion Waiters. And like talking about LeBron, like now at this point in his career, you figure he'd be able to, like we talk about his recruiting skills and blah, blah, blah. Like, who's he recruited so far? 34-year-old Mike Miller and all 97 points that James Jones scored last season? Like,
right, yeah.
Big whoop.
I mean, that's a good point, but also, like, then you also look at it like, okay, but if they don't trade for him, then who is your third best player on this team? And you've got LeBron, you've got overrated Kyrie, and then, I mean, Wiggins is, I guess, is your hopefully going to be your third best player. Maybe he becomes really good soon. Maybe he doesn't. Like, it's just what you value. Like Kevin Love brings, like, he is a definite elite, but he is not definite years. Andrew Wiggins is definite years, but not definite elite. So it's kind of just like, what is important to you, and I think that's just kind of like where everyone is disagreeing, like whether you want the elite player now, and then you figure it out, or whether you value years and stability and take the chance on a budding superstar.
I mean, I think we just saw in Miami that if you can get those three elites together, you've got a pretty good shot every year to win a championship. So as much as I would like to see the Cleveland wait, it is tough to argue against them going out and getting Love, just because having two of the 10 best players in the league and another top, another all-star right there, it gives you a chance no matter what. So, but it's just in my opinion, you just kind of have to having the flexibility and the depth, to me at this point seems logical or at least to me, to go with what you have now and just see what you have. But I mean, this is Cleveland we're talking about. They haven't made the quote unquote right decision in basically since LeBron left, and they still ended up with LeBron and now the chance to get Kevin Love, or the chance to have Andrew Wiggins and Kyrie on the roster with him. So I mean, who are we to say? Cleveland clearly thinks they know something we don't know, with the way things have worked out for them the last couple of years.
I'm going to jump on the kind of thing that everyone else has said. I think the biggest problem for that team, even if they do trade for Love, is like Varejao is a great player that I love a lot. He can't stay healthy, and everyone is saying they need rim protection. And I'm not reinventing the wheel by saying that, but it still remains very, very true. And
right.
You talk about just a funny aside, a point I wanted to make, because Bry, when the Dang trade happened back in mid-season, like you and I argued about that at length, even on an article on Number Fire, we went back and forth, and I was all for it, and you were against it. I just want to say that if they hadn't made that trade, the end of their year would have ended differently. They would have gotten a different place in the lottery, and they wouldn't have won it. So they wouldn't have gotten Wiggins, and they might not have gotten LeBron to come back because they didn't have Wiggins as an asset, and then they wouldn't be trading that for Love. So basically, the best decision they ever made was to trade for Luol Deng mid-season, because it put them in exactly the right place for this thing to develop.
There you go, Luol Deng. Best thing that's ever happened to the Cavs franchise. Look at that.
Yeah.
Oh, man. So we're going to play the win share game in just a second, but quickly, before we end the podcast, can we talk about, like, maybe projected lineup? Like, Russ, who do you think is going to be the starters opening night? Assuming Love comes and Wiggins and Bennett goes out, who's the starter for the Cavs?
Okay, I'm going to say here's the interesting wrench in all this is there are two things. First of all, Sean Marion is rumored to be like talking to them, and maybe that's going to happen.
So Brian Windhorst on Bill Simmons' podcast today said that it was like a done deal.
Oh, really? Because I'm looking right now. I just saw the Pacers are reportedly making a strong push to sign free agent Sean Marion, which would make a ton of sense with Georgia.
Right.
So, like, depending on when people hear this, maybe something's happened with Sean Marion. We'll have to get this up quickly. So that.
Right. Yeah.
But anyway, if he ends up in Cleveland, let's say, instead of on the Pacers, that's interesting. He backs up LeBron's position. I don't know. At that point, do you like? There was a time when we talked about LeBron being anywhere from a 1 to a 4. Like, could you conceivably, like, I don't think I'd move him down to a guard position. Would you potentially? Can Marion play shooting guard? Can he?
I don't think so.
Well, he can't. That's part of the problem.
Yeah, that's the thing. So he's coming off the bench regardless. So your starting lineup, like you asked me, I would say Kyrie Irving, Dion Waiters because he won't shut up about it, LeBron, Love, and Varejao. Now, the thing with Waiters is I think he's better served coming up. He's a good scoring threat off the bench type thing. That's a good role for him. I think he should develop into that, but he won't He won't keep his mouth shut about this concept of I should start, I should start. I don't care who else is playing around. Dion Waiters is the best player on the Cavaliers. Forget LeBron James, forget Kevin Love, and forget Kyrie Irving. I should be starting.
That's that Philadelphia attitude for you.
Yeah. So I feel like he's got to start. We'll see what happens. We can't really project because this David Blatt guy. We don't know what he's got going on in his head and what he plans on doing, and if he's going to do what we all think he'll do, or if he's got some kind of out of the box thinking. Honestly, could Mike Miller start at the 2?
I was about to say that it might make sense. I mean, he played 82 games last year in Memphis, so he clearly isn't as brittle as he looked in Miami. So, if I had my way, I would, I think they could get pretty weird with their lineup. Let's say they do sign Marion. Maybe they could go like a kind of what Brooklyn did, a hybrid, like big small lineup where maybe they go Kyrie, Mike Miller, LeBron, Sean Marion, and Kevin Love, and bring Varejao off the bench, which might save his body. Bring Waiters off the bench and let him run the second unit and let him be the star that he thinks he is, for 10 minutes a game without Kyrie and LeBron. I think that would be ideal. I saw Brian Windhorst did a piece on Kyrie and Waiters learning to play with LeBron, and Waiters said in that piece that he's gonna learn from what Dwayne Wade did. But honestly, look, Dion Waiters is not Dwayne Wade, obviously. I mean, who knows what he could develop into?
It's a cute thing to say, though.
Yeah, I mean, look, I said this with Wade before when we all assumed LeBron was staying there, that Wade should start, figure out how to be a Ginobili type player. Why can't Waiters do that? He's young enough in his career that he could. I mean, if he would accept it, which it doesn't sound like he wants to, why couldn't he be the guy that plays, a couple minutes a game without, the other big names, and he'd still be on the floor to close out games. I'd say almost definitely. He is. Right now he stands as probably their third best scorer before they make a trade. Like, he can score the ball for sure. So why not, give yourself a chance to really run the offense for a little while instead of playing off the ball, which clearly isn't his strength. But I mean, from everything I've read about Blatt, he's very bright, he's very creative, he's going to think outside the box. So I think we could definitely get some very interesting lineup combinations. It'll take some time for them to figure it out for sure. You've got a Swiss Army knife in LeBron, so you can do a lot of things around him and figure out what works. It took the Heat almost 2 years and took them to the brink of being eliminated by the Pacers in 2012 to really figure out how to properly use LeBron. So to think that the Cavs are going to know what to do with their lineups from day one is a little silly to think, but there's a lot of potential there. Before the Love trade and after, assuming it happens, they've got a lot of potential to do some very interesting things that would make the positionless people, the people that are really into the positional revolution, would make them pretty happy.
Like, Bry's very into the positional revolution.
Yeah.
As am I. That's basically what our site is about. But anyway, we'll get into that another day. My big question, like when it comes to the starting lineup, let's say that Dion Waiters is the X factor here because basically the other 4 positions we know exactly who should be starting, right? So for Dion Waiters to start there, he's going to have to play a different role than he plays currently. Like that's all there is to it. Like, listen, this guy plays 30 minutes a game, or has basically his last 2 seasons. He scores close to 15 points, and he has a usage rate of over 26 the last 2 seasons. Now, is he going to have a usage rate over 26% with Kyrie Irving, LeBron James, and Kevin Love on the floor? Hell no. Like, he's going to have to learn how to do things a little bit differently. Now, his catch and shoot 3-point shooting last year was actually pretty good.
It was really good, actually. Yeah.
At 41.6%. So now, if he can become that player and thrive off the fact that he's going to get open looks, because if he is playing with those 3 players, he's going to get a ton of open looks. And now his 3-point percentage last year went up from 31 in his rookie year to 36.8 last year. And if like the whole LeBron effect, like if he can get his percentages up and be the catch and shoot guy, fine. But he's always been a guy that eats possessions for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And if he wants to start so badly, he has to realize that that's what he's going to have to do.
Just one quick thing. Waiters 36.8% last year, better than any year of Dwayne Wade's career by 5%.
Fantastic point.
So,
Yeah, that is a good point. I actually think that Waiters is going to end up being a really good player. I mean, you're right. His spot up shooting numbers are really good, and I mean his usage rate is really high, and he's kind of had the knack of that. Him and Kyrie just butt heads because they both want the ball. But I mean I feel like a lot of that was just kind of the offense. Kyrie's not really a great creator and distributor, and so like when Waiters comes in. I mean, what is he supposed to do? Like, I just don't feel like he's been in a really great situation the past couple of years. I think that he will thrive being a kind of a spot up guy, and he'll have to do that because LeBron's not really. I don't think he's going to let him be anyone else other than that. But like, just imagine the lineup of Kyrie, Mike, or I guess you put Mike Miller at the 3. So Kyrie, Dion, Mike Miller, LeBron, and Kevin Love. I mean, you have great three-point shooting at every position. I mean, that would be a lineup that we've never really seen before.
I love that. You might have sold me on it right there. I drool at that idea. Apart from the defense, like the rim, like again to harp on the rim protection, but like the offense would definitely negate that.
Yeah. Yeah, they just have to outscore everyone, in which they would. I mean, that I can't even think off the top of my head a lineup that has shooting at every position. I mean, maybe the Hawks when they moved Millsap to the 5, but not at the level that this would be next year.
The only lineup I can think of that's comparable was the Pelicans, their ideal finishing lineup last year that played like 40 minutes together, or maybe even less than that, with Holiday, Evans, Gordon, Davis, and Ryan Anderson.
Yeah, but Davis can't shoot from long range. Like what Brian's saying was like this entire lineup would be really effective on the perimeter.
That lineup, though, scored something like 125 points per 100 possessions in the little time they played together. So you could imagine that this Cleveland lineup would
destroy teams. Yeah.
Just absolutely steamroll teams offensively. There's just no way to shut that down.
That's a good point. Okay.
Yeah, I'm excited to watch that. So yeah, we'll kind of end with that note on all of the love to Cleveland stuff. I'm sure we'll talk about it all the time in the next couple months, and it'll probably be the story that we talk about every podcast over the next several years. I feel like
we're going to be 20 years from now talking about like, well, what if they hadn't traded Wiggins, and what if this is going to be one of the biggest ones I think we've had in a long time.
I agree.
One of scenarios.
Yeah. So before we go, we'll play the win share game since you guys liked it last time. So I will give you 2 players, and you have to tell me which one posted more win shares last year. So the first one is Joel Anthony or O.J. Mayo. Russ, I'll start with you.
See, now the thing is, I feel like I said last time when we played this, I feel like this has got to be a trick question because you look at O.J. Mayo, and 2 years ago, like in Dallas, he was fairly effective, at least the beginning of the season. He kind of jumped off the deep end at the end, and of course he was terrible with Milwaukee last season at everything other than eating himself out of playing basketball. But
beat me to the fat joke, Russ.
I had to. But I have to say, I'm going to say Joel Anthony because this feels like a trick question, and it would make more sense that at least O.J. Mayo had time on the floor and would have accumulated some, but I'm sure he went into the negative, so I'm gonna go with Joel Anthony.
Yeah. Brett, what do you think?
I'm gonna go with Anthony as well. I just can't. From what little I saw of the Bucks last year, I rarely saw Mayo on the floor. He was injured. He was eating every kielbasa in Milwaukee. So I would imagine in the minutes Joel Anthony got in Boston, he at least contributed something with defense and rebounding, and Mayo contributed nothing or took stuff off the plate. So I'm going to go with Anthony as well.
Interesting. Mayo, lover of the kielbasas. So it was actually, yeah, you're right. It was Joel Anthony. He had .2 win shares, and O.J. Mayo in all of his time and kielbasa eating only accumulated .1 win shares.
Gee whiz.
Oh, man. Milwaukee, I hope that Jabari and Giannis are
I'm telling you, Giannis and Jabari together has me drooling over that team. And you have to think that, okay, between Larry Sanders, Ersan Ilyasova, and OJ Mayo just being complete duds last year, if one of them can, if two of those three can be anywhere near as effective as they've been in the past, they'll be an interesting team again.
Even decent, yeah. We don't
and Brandon Knight was underrated last year. Brandon Knight was playing at a pretty good year last year. You know, for all the crapping on him we've done about being dunked on by DeAndre Jordan and that being his legacy, like and him not being very good in Detroit, like he was good for Milwaukee last year in stretches.
Yeah, he was. Speaking of guards, I'll give you a couple guards: Rajon Rondo or Trey Burke. Russ.
Even with Rajon Rondo playing a very limited portion of the season, it has to be him. I know Trey Burke. The thing with the rookie class last season is they all like hemorrhaged advanced stats. Like we on our website, the nerd score for those rookies. I think I'm gonna write something on that. Was like it felt like historically bad. Like there were a lot of them in the negatives. Like even Oladipo, Michael Carter Williams, because they weren't very efficient ball players last year because they had to carry a team like unfortunately Wiggins is going to have to do. So I'm sure he's headed that direction too. So anyway, I'm going to say what was the original question?
Rondo or Burke?
Rondo.
Brett.
I'm going to go with Rondo as well. He was about average from what I think his PR was probably right around league average, but that's still going to be a hell of a lot better than Trey Burke, who couldn't shoot a lick last year and was stuck playing on an awful team. So even though the Celtics weren't all that much better, I think Rondo contributed a couple more wins than Burke did.
You're right. Yep, it was Rondo. But it was a lot closer than people might think. He had 1.1 win shares and Burke had 0.9. So just a little bit off.
What was the game difference between them, the two of them?
What's that?
How many more games did Burke play than Rondo?
That's a good question. I'm going to look it up real quick.
Let's see, I got Trey Burke at 70, Rajon Rondo at 30.
There you go.
That is sad. All right, and last one, Chris Kaman or Jimmer Fredette. Russ, who you got?
Let me see here. Here, Brett, you do this one. I started the last two. I'm gonna steal your thunder. Mostly because I don't know. So go.
You know, I think considering that the highlight of Chris Kaman's season was when he took a nap on the Lakers bench. Just going off of that, I know he was awful on both ends last year. I know he shot a very low percentage, did nothing on defense. You got to imagine that Jimmer had to have contributed something more than that. I know he didn't get a whole lot of playing time, but at least he wasn't overly damaging during his time on the court. So I'm going with Jimmer.
Jimmer was crazy efficient in what little time he did get on the floor. He shot really well from distance, and of course, Jimmer Mania never carried over to the NBA, and I wanted it too more, but you got the stink of Sacramento on him, and for some reason on a Bulls team that couldn't create offense, they couldn't find a way to use them. I say they couldn't find a way to use them as if I'm on a high horse and I'm talking to Tom Thibodeau here, but I mean, you know what I mean. He's going to be interesting on the Pelicans, and basically, like you said, Kaman didn't really do a whole lot. Although I'm pretty sure he was pretty efficient too in terms of his field goal percentage and everything like that, and he did get decent rebounding numbers in limited time and et cetera, et cetera. But I'm going to say Jimmer Fredette as well, though I might regret it.
You got 3 for 3 today. Jimmer was the correct answer. He had 0.8 win shares, and Chris Kaman had 0.5 win shares.
Wow, we are good at this, Brett. We're really good at this.
On point. I don't know if we've missed one in 2 podcasts yet.
Yeah, I don't think you have. Even though if there was an advanced stat for hilarious superimposed pictures, I feel like Kaman and Lance Stevenson would be at the top of the list.
Oh yeah, we gotta get on that. We should be keeping score of this, by the way. We're gonna have to go back to the tape, and I want a final tally at some point, so I know if what we're playing for and everything.
Okay, yeah, I'll go back and listen. I'm pretty sure one of you guys missed one last time. I just can't remember who it was.
Okay.
But I'll go back and listen to it, and we'll give you guys the final tally, or the tally so far in our next podcast.
Sounds good.
But that'll be it. Thanks, you guys, for listening. I'm Brian Mears, Russell Peddle, Brett Wiseman. Thanks for joining me, guys. It was fun. Let's do it again soon.
Talk to you soon, Brian.
Peace.
See ya.